Hey, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to sit down and record this episode because we're going to be talking about the basics of my entire business, essentially. We're going to talk a little bit about functional medicine, what it is, why it's important, and then we're going to get into the two types of functional medicine testing that I use in my practice and kind of a little bit of an explanation of what that testing is for, who it's good for, who should get it, how I use it. So, first of all, let's talk about functional medicine. You guys probably hear me talk about functional medicine. I say, I'm a functional medicine nurse. My practice is based in functional medicine. My training has been in functional medicine. I like to help you get to the root cause of your problems, of your symptoms, of, your issues that you're having. But like, what does that even actually mean and why is it important? So, I'm going to try to talk through an analogy to sort of explain the functional medicine model. So, I want you to think about having a bucket, and your job is to fill this bucket up with water. And you have a hose that you have brought over to this bucket, and you are putting the water in the bucket. But for whatever reason, you're not really sure why, but you just can't fill the bucket up. So you bring in a second hose to bring in more water. And you're still trying to fill the bucket up, but it will not fill up. Well, when you're looking at things from a conventional medicine lens only, this is sort of what happens. We have a problem, we have a symptom, and we can't really figure out why we're experiencing it. And instead of addressing the actual problem, which is that there's a hole in the bottom of the bucket, we just keep adding in medicines or flat ignoring the fact that there's an issue, that there's a symptom, that there's a problem. So, functional medicine in this little scenario that I'm talking through, functional medicine is taking a look at the entire picture and backing up and saying, wait, hey, hold on a second. We don't actually need a second hose to fill this bucket up. What we actually need is some tape, some plaster, some type of equipment because there's a hole in the bottom of this bucket and that's really our problem. If we fix the hole in the bottom of the bucket, we're going to get it filled up and we're going to be fine. Everybody's going to feel good. We're going to be good. I hope that analogy makes sense. It made more sense maybe in my mind when I was talking through it than when I said it out loud. But I think you guys will follow me. Basically, with functional medicine, we're not just covering things up with a band-aid or ignoring them or dismissing them. We are really trying to listen to what the body is trying to communicate because symptoms are messages from our body to us, trying to signal to us, like, hey, I need support over here. I need help over here. Something over here is not functioning at an optimal point or functioning in the way that it should. That is our body's way. The symptoms are our body's way of letting us know that we have an issue. And when we address those issues just with medication or a random supplement, then we're not really capturing what exactly is causing that in the first place. So, one of the most important pieces of functional medicine that I admittedly probably don't talk about enough on this podcast or in my social posts is having an actual conversation with the client. Tell me your story. And then me asking further details, or having you fill out a very thorough intake form where I'm capturing all of the information I need. Sometimes, if you're having like a face to face or a virtual visit with a functional practitioner, these can last 30 minutes to an hour. I want you to think about the last time that you had that type of time to explain to your traditional provider, whether that be a doctor, nurse practitioner, PA, whoever it is that you're seeing, but you had that kind of undivided attention and time to explain to them what it is you're experiencing, what you're feeling, and what is going on. Most of the time, when you are going to see a provider, you might have about 15 to 20 minutes with your provider. And it's not that they're doing this intentionally, it's out of a need to like get through your appointment and get on to the next person, but it's common for them to interrupt you when you're trying to convey your story and your explanation of the symptoms that you're experiencing and maybe even trying to share with them some of the things that you've done to try to fix it. they're kind of cutting you off or making assumptions about what you're trying to you're trying to tell them instead of just listening to what you're sharing, letting you fully explain it, and then giving their education, their guidance, their input. So that's a really important pillar of functional medicine, is getting a very thorough intake and picture of what it is that's currently going on, and sometimes even going a little deeper than that and understanding, when did these things begin to happen? And was there, like, what else was going on in your life when this symptom started to happen or after this symptom started happening? Um, those pieces can really help me as a functional provider piece together kind of your health timeline. And we can almost then work backwards a little bit to figure out where that hole is in the bucket that we really need to address. Now, the other part of my functional medicine practice that I love is the functional testing piece. I am a very data driven person. I love to see the data back up what it is that I'm thinking and kind of assuming and leaning towards just by hearing someone's symptoms and their story and their experiences. Because I truly do believe that we need the data to back us up, because there are times that just based on conversations and based on symptom assessments alone, we kind of head down the wrong path, because there's times that, a symptom could mean a couple different things. Like, it might mean that potassium's low, but it could also mean that magnesium's high. It could also mean that calcium's high. Like, we have to get the data to really back us up and verify for us that we are headed in the right direction. And when we can do that, we get to remove the piece of like throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying a bunch of different things and seeing what helps or what sticks, essentially. Goodness, excuse me. I'm so sorry. I had to cough. My allergies have been really giving me a run for my money lately. Anyway, with functional testing, we get to skip that step for the most part. And since we have the data, we know exactly what direction we need to go. We know exactly in the body which systems we need to focus on. We know which supplements are going to help, which minerals we need to replenish. We know what the hormone levels are. And I just can't explain to you, like, just how pivotal that is and how important that is for seeing progress quickly and creating a plan that's sustainable. So, I wanted to dive into the two tests that I use in my practice and tell you a little bit more about them. So, first, I want to talk about HTMA testing, because I do that test on like every single client that I work with. It's a hair tissue mineral analysis. It is a very simple test. You take the sample from yourself in the comfort of your own home, you drop it in your mailbox, and send it off to the lab. It's very easy to do. Some people have to kind of get over mentally the idea of cutting their own hair, but it's not a lot of hair that you have to use for the sample. It's a very manageable amount. You can have a partner, a friend, even your hairstylist cut that sample for you. If the idea of cutting it yourself is just like, it really freaks you out, I totally understand that. That's fine. But then here is the data that we get from this test. This is an assessment of your minerals and also your heavy metals. Now, heavy metals don't really have a place in our body that they are supposed to be, but we get exposed to them through our foods, our water, the things we breathe, the products that we use. It's really unavoidable. You can definitely make choices to reduce those exposures, but it's not something you can avoid entirely. And we have on our cells, if you remember from like high school, middle school, our cells have receptors on them. And if you think of these receptors kind of like parking spots, all of our minerals have assigned parking spots. They have assigned places they are to go, on our cells, on these cell receptors. But if there's not enough of those minerals to get into each of those assigned parking spaces, a heavy metal can come along and essentially steal that parking space and try to mimic the job of that mineral. And it can, to an extent, kind of do the job that the mineral does, but not as well, not as effectively, and it's not serving our body in the best way possible. So we don't want that to happen. We want our body to have a sufficient amount of minerals that we can have all the minerals be in their appropriate parking places. And that way, when we are getting exposed to these heavy metals, instead of our body hanging on to them, they're going to be detoxed and excreted. So with the HTMA test, we get a reading of these individual mineral levels. This is going to be things like your calcium, your magnesium, your sodium, potassium, copper, cobalt. There's over 38 different data points that we get with an HTMA test, which is another reason why it's one of my favorite tests, because we get so much data within just one simple test. But we also get insight into the way different body functions are functioning. We get insight into your metabolism. We get insight into thyroid function, um, your hormone balance, your blood sugar balance. And there's even indicators on the test where we can see, like, is this showing us signs that the body has a lot of inflammation or maybe a chronic either viral or bacterial disease or illness that it's fighting and has been fighting for a long time. We get insight into all of that with the HTMA test. So, that wealth of knowledge that we gain from one simple test is one of the reasons that I really love it. The second reason is because we also get insight from a longer period of time. And what I mean by that is you can get some of your mineral levels tested through blood work. It's a different view of them than we get with hair tissue mineral analysis. Um, because when we get blood work done, we're looking at the levels outside of the cell. When we get a hair tissue mineral analysis test done, we are looking at the inside of the cell, which is where a lot of our like hormones and vitamins and minerals, they need to be inside the cell and in sufficient amounts to do their job properly. So that's why it's like a better assessment of things. Our body tries to maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is like a leveled playing field almost. It's like a content state. And our body works really, really hard to keep our blood in a state of homeostasis. So it is, I don't want to say it's rare that you find imbalances on blood work because it's not rare, but it is, you almost have to be at a state of imbalance or illness, like that is like you're already kind of at the point that you're pretty sick or you're pretty deficient or you're pretty out of balance if we're seeing it on blood work. We see it much sooner on the hair tissue mineral analysis just because of our body's efforts to maintain that homeostasis within the blood. Other kind of last reason that I wanted to touch on for why I really like this test is when you do go get blood work done, that test only reflects what the levels were in the body at that one specific point in time that the lab was drawn. With an HTMA test, we are seeing a reflection of an average over the past 3 to 4 months. And that is much more insightful than just one specific point in time. Okay, so then I want to talk a little bit about Dutch testing. Dutch testing is a dried urine comprehensive assessment of your hormones. So this is going to give us an estrogen, progesterone, testosterone level. It's going to give us a cortisol pattern, which if you don't know, cortisol is your stress hormone that's released. It's released all throughout the day, and we definitely need it and we want it. It's kind of what gets us up, gets us going, keeps us functioning. But unfortunately, a lot of us have either too much of it or we've been in a state of chronic stress for a long period of time and now we don't produce enough of it, or we're kind of just producing amounts of it at the wrong levels at the wrong time. And we can see that on a Dutch test because we get to see that pattern. A Dutch test also gives us a variety of different data points to go off of. We can see how the body is metabolizing, so basically, like using up estrogen. And that is important because we can then also see like how the body is detoxing it. And there are different pathways that our body pushes estrogen down that can be safer for us versus more dangerous and kind of puts us at risk for developing estrogen related cancers later on in life. So it's definitely something that we want to be aware of if it's an issue because we can correct that. So I always kind of like sum this up and explain this in this way. Dutch testing will tell us what your hormone levels are with a little bit of insight into where we might need to focus our attention. Like, for example, if we see estrogen dominance, then we know we're going to need to work on estrogen detox and detox for the body in general. But HTMA test is really where we kind of identify that root cause or the reason for why the hormone levels are what they are. So, to summarize that again, Dutch testing will tell us what the hormone levels are. HTMA testing helps us figure out why they are what they are. That's why I love to marry these two tests together. There are certain clients that most clients, honestly, I would recommend them getting both pieces together so that we can look at all of the data and make the best plan possible for them that is customized to their body specific needs. Now, I want to touch just for a second on who I would recommend get each test or both. So, for someone that is struggling with their period, maybe they are struggling with fertility. That can be primary fertility issues, secondary infertility. Maybe they've went off birth control for, at least 3 months and they're still not getting their cycle back. And then for also women that are at that point in life where they're like, I'm having a lot of hormone symptoms kind of come out of nowhere, and I'm wondering if I'm headed into like perimenopause and menopause, that's also someone I would recommend a test for. Um, the only times that I do not think that a Dutch test is helpful for you, and I personally would not run it, would be if someone is breastfeeding because that really impacts our hormone levels. And I just do not feel like it's accurate. There's other things we could do instead. If someone is on birth control, because then whichever form of birth control it is that you're on is what's dictating your hormones. And for the work that I do with clients, that information just would not be helpful to us in creating your plan. And then for the person that has gone off birth control just recently and is not either they're unhappy now with their PMS symptoms, or the cycle hasn't returned yet. We have to give the body time, and typically that's going to be at least 3 months. We have to give the body time to reestablish the communication between the ovaries and the brain. And the things we do now impacts our egg quality 100 days from now. So that's approximately 3 cycles, 3-ish months. So that's why I say that. There are exceptions to that depending on the severity of like the PMS, PMDD symptoms that might be popping up, but that's just kind of a general, that's the 3 situations where I wouldn't recommend Dutch testing. Outside of that, if you are like having cycle problems, if you are having issues with fertility and getting pregnant, then absolutely a Dutch test is going to be helpful. HTMA test, there's really not a situation where I wouldn't recommend a HTMA test. The only case where I wouldn't recommend one is if you just had one like 2 months ago. We at least want to give, I usually go 6 months typically between tests because when we do a new HTMA test or a repeat HTMA test, we want to make sure that we're looking at all new data, things that have changed since you started implementing lifestyle changes, dietary changes, supplements from your first test before we reevaluate, because we always want to be making sure that we're looking at new data. That's the only situation I can think of where I would say, like, no, an HTMA test is not going to be helpful for you. And really, the answer there is just, it's not going to be helpful for you yet. Wait just a little longer, and then we could do another one. HTMA testing, um, because of the amount of information and the things that we learn from an HTMA test, if you're having symptoms of anything at all, and that goes even beyond like hormone related things, like anything at all. That's just not what I specialize in my practice. But if you're having symptoms at all, unless your health is like tip top A plus shape, an HTMA test is going to be helpful for you. So that's why in my packages, I do have a package where I offer just HTMA testing. And then I have my other package where I offer both, because there are those few situations that I wouldn't recommend a Dutch test, or at least not at that time. So I hope that this is helpful. I hope that it gives you kind of a introduction maybe to the purpose behind functional medicine, and then how I use these two tests, why I use them. The biggest takeaway from this is that the functional testing piece is what helps me really customize a plan specifically to your body's needs. And we don't get that a lot of times in other places or other ways. I think that's why it's so important. And what I have seen is that it is the one thing that helps speed up the timeline between people getting results and staying stuck in that I'm trying all these different things, hoping that it's going to work and waiting to see what it is that will work. We get to cut that part out, because when we have the actual data to back up our reasoning, we can just implement and hit the ground running. So, there is in the show notes linked for you the application to work with me. You can fill that out. I get a little bit of information from you about like what's going on, and then I communicate back with you about, if I have any additional questions or what package and what testing I think might be helpful for you. So if you're curious if I could help you, then take some time. It doesn't take long. Take a few minutes, fill out that application, and that just opens up the door for us to be able to communicate more about it and me to give you, my insights. Also, in the show notes, if you have not grabbed it before, there is a free resource for you. It is my Hormones 101 Secret podcast. So if you are kind of new to my world or new to hormone balancing, that is a great place for you to get started. It's totally free. You can binge the whole thing in under 25 minutes. And then, of course, I would love for you to subscribe to the podcast. That ensures that anytime I release a new episode, you don't miss it. Because I would love for you to continue hanging out with me here on the podcast. I have some very exciting episodes coming up where we're going to be diving deeper into specific hormone imbalances, like estrogen dominance, like secondary infertility, like PCOS. And I'm very excited about that. I don't think we have done deep dives into those topics before here on the podcast. And then I would also love to reincorporate some question and answer episodes. So if you guys have questions for me that you would like to get answered, you can always head over to my Instagram. It's wellness with Vanda. And you can submit a question for me to do like a really short mini episode here on the podcast to answer. So I'm going to wrap up there. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and I will talk to you guys next week.